Hi, today I'm joined by Lawrence from the Edison Electric Institute. Hi Lawrence, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Later today you'll be presenting on pathways to building integrated infrastructure in Africa. What is going to be some of the key highlights out of your presentation?
I think one of the key highlights with regards to building infrastructure in Africa is going to be focused on the notion of public-private partnership. One of the things I'm going to be doing is expanding this notion and including customer, because most of the time PPP partnerships are focused on the public sector and the private sector, but more and more as we look at Africa evolving, I think it's important to include the customer in the picture, and so I'll be emphasizing that. I'll also be talking about some of the major trends we see as it relates to demographic shifts and how that impacts how we build infrastructure in the future. And then lastly, I will talk a little bit about urbanization as we look at the need for integrated infrastructure is because it's no longer just the case of looking at energy. You have to look at energy in the context of water, transportation, agriculture. So taking a holistic view is something I'm going to be emphasizing in my remarks today.
And by 2050, scientists are saying that we could be looking at an extra 2 billion people on the planet. In your view, what does the energy mix look like?
I think the energy mix is going to be very diversified. It has to be. I think the more we look at the evolution of energy systems around the world, we have to factor in three things: reliability, sustainability, and affordability. And once you take those three factors into consideration, the future looks very bright, but the future has to be diversified. And so we will see a range of resources in terms of the supply side. I think on the grid side or the infrastructure side, we're going to see both a combination of large systems, but also smaller systems. So you have everything from decentralized as well as the decentralized. So I think the future is going to be bright, but it has to be diversified if we're going to really harness the resources we have in Africa.
And to achieve this, what do you see as being some of the key challenges?
I think one of the key, there's several challenges. I think one that everyone has talked about is the need for having the right regulatory framework in place, right, having the right business environment. You read a lot about that, but I think we have to get past acknowledging the challenges and start looking at the solutions. So obviously the challenges are well known, but I think in terms of blind spots that I think we have on the horizon, I think technology disruption is something we have to pay attention to, because if we now make certain assumptions about technology today, 20 years from now, things are going to be fundamentally different. And so gauging that future in terms of how technology will evolve, but also understanding how the disruption that technology could bring could be harnessed in Africa in terms of how we develop systems, I think is going to be key.
In your view, how do you see the digital utility in Africa?
I think digitalization in general is going to have a major impact in Africa infrastructure in general, not just from the utility side, but all infrastructures are going to be impacted by digitalization. Now, one of the challenges we have as we adapt technology, new technology, we have to make sure we have in place the right regulatory policy frameworks, right? We have to make sure we have the right business model. So I think digitalization will bring a lot of opportunities in terms of how we harness the resources. I think how we also manage the resources is going to be benefited by digitalization. And I think lastly, another key point about digitalization is that it brings with it some challenges, one being cybersecurity. And so I think as Africa brings upon all these new technology, we need to really understand cybersecurity, and that's one of the areas where I think there needs to be more focus, is that we need to build the right human capacity around cybersecurity to be able to really take advantage of digitalization as it affects the infrastructure in Africa.
Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us.